Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of WagMe TV. We have the NFT NYC edition today, and as always, I am joined by the absolute homies. We got the Doctor, Doc Mata. We got the NFT Lord himself, so it was his week this week, Alex Garcia, and we got the All-American, Ev Smith. How we doing, fellas?
Doing good. Coming into this episode at a little different time. We're doing a little Friday happy hour. So the week's finished up, and I don't know. It's good to be back. I'm excited to hear about NFT NYC. So it sounded like a hell of a week that you had.
Yeah, it was definitely very busy, very interesting, and just, I'm pretty drained, but definitely excited to chat about it. As Evan mentioned, this is actually our first daytime episode, so hopefully the lighting is a little better for folks, for the viewers. Still need to, I guess, invest a little bit of our budget into some better lighting all around, but hopefully the viewers enjoy this one. Yeah, I guess we can kind of hop straight into it. An absolutely unbelievable week here in the Big Apple. I think, I can start with like a few of kind of my main takeaways, and we can kind of open it up to discussion. And I'm sure you guys have some questions and stuff. Was definitely missing you guys. I wish if we could have all hit this together. Maybe next year.
That would have been awesome. Yeah, next year.
Yeah. A little WagMe TV event.
Yeah. Maybe we'll host our own AMA, We'll have our
So I'll start by saying I was actually gifted a ticket to the conference by one of the rebels in this NFT community that I just joined. So just wanted to give a quick shout out to the Rebels fam. I know we covered them in the last episode, but because of them, I was able to go to this conference, and that's just, I guess, a testament to the type of community that they're building over there, and shout out to them. In terms of some kind of key takeaways and key themes that I saw throughout my week there, obviously got to talk to a lot of different people, went to a lot of different panels and stuff. And the first thing I'll say is, the energy was just absolutely electric. Going into the week, obviously we're in a little bit of a bear market and stuff. And so going into the week, I didn't really know how that was going to, kind of portray itself at this conference. And I'll be the first to say, like, and I don't think I'll be the last one to say this, but like, it didn't even feel like there was a bear market. Like, it felt like we were still in completely like straight bull market territory, with the amount of energy and the amount of people and just the amount of like positivity around the entire space. So that was really cool. Another, I'd say a big theme this year, and through talking to people, I think this was different than last year, where there was a ton of emphasis, and I'm sure you guys will love to hear this because this is a lot of what we talk about. There was a ton of emphasis on utility, right? It's like, it seemed like last year, there was a lot of hype around, just PFP projects for, we're just gonna, drop this NFT, it'll be a cool profile picture, and like, we have this huge roadmap and we're gonna overpromise and underdeliver, and like, that's the entire project. Versus almost every panel that I went to this time was talking about, okay, you have this NFT in your wallet, like, what are you going to be able to do with it, right? So a lot more focus on like that utility aspect, which was awesome to see.
And so, quick question for you, just for some of the viewers that might not know, I guess, is NFT NYC solely, event around NFTs? Is it all crypto? I guess what are the different events that like you would see if you went to an NFT NYC?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely, so let me see if I can pull up their website and kind of the program here. So I would say it's definitely NFT specific, but within NFTs, so here's kind of like their overall website, but this was kind of the like overarching program that you could kind of go through. They took a lot of stuff off this at the moment, I think. Actually, no, they didn't. This is all like from the top, right? But they have these tags. And so these tags are kind of like how you would be able to break down, what kind of sector or what,
awesome.
Yeah, what kind of area specifically that these panels or these events would be kind of covering. So you could, there's everything from fashion, film, future, gaming, investing, legal stuff, accounting, music, social, sports. So you could, it really gave you the opportunity to kind of curate the experience that you wanted and that you were interested in. They had, I believe, like 5 or 6 different venues, all in the Times Square area. So very walkable. It was very easy to attend the things that you wanted to attend. I will say, if I had one gripe, it's like all these times weren't necessarily correct, because they had so many speakers this year that, like, if one even went over by a little bit, it would kind of throw off the timing for like the rest of the day. Right. So, I mean, you might show up at a place at, whatever, 10 o'clock or 11 or whenever it said it was, and it might not start for another 20 minutes.
Right.
But, you just end up listening to somebody else speak about something interesting. And, it was overall like really well put together, I think. Does that kind of answer your question on how it was broken up? Like, I think they also have, they had stuff specifically on, finance and like things like that, which ended up gearing more towards like kind of the crypto DeFi kind of space. But broad based, it was all like mostly NFT based, I would say.
Right. And so there's kind of a flavor for everyone, right? If you're interested in different areas of different types of NFT collections, or, like you're saying, like different DeFi protocols or projects, like there's stuff for everybody out there. So it's not just specific to, hey, I'm looking into a PFP NFT collection. There's a ton of things where you can hop in and learn something new from like a new collection.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I actually really love the point that you made, Sam. It's kind of like, you go for your heavy hitters. These are the exact people I want to see. Kind of like, like a music festival in general, right? You're going to go for certain people, but sometimes, you end up coming across something that was super, super cool, and they end up being one of your favorite artists kind of moving forward. So like 2 questions that I have for you that you don't have to answer now, but I'd love to hear by like the end of the show today, is just one, like, who is your favorite? What was your favorite event? And then 2, what was the surprise event that like came out of nowhere that you weren't necessarily planning on, that was like, wow, that was super cool. I'm glad I was here for that. So those are going to be my 2 questions for kind of the end of this, but it doesn't have to be right now.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say which one was my complete favorite, but ones that had to do, and this kind of goes into my next point of like, what areas did I come out of this experience being like, wow, like this area really kind of stands out to me, right? And I think it kind of can break down into like 3 main areas, particularly on the NFT side, that I was like, okay, like these themes and like this moving forward, like really stands out to me. One was the entertainment sector, right? So like everything that I went to a bunch of, sports, music, future of music, kind of like the, like those kind of like entertainment, and also a few that I went to were film based. I believe Spike Lee spoke at one, which was really funny because he went like 30 minutes over. And he was just rambling. Yeah. I think somebody asked him about the Knicks too, and he's like, "Oh, I gotta stand up for this one." And he like stood up and just like went on a rant. But he's actually, planning on dropping his own NFT collection. So he was talking a little bit about that, and just kind of the sense you get from this kind of entertainment, sports, music arena is this is going to be really interesting kind of moving forward. And the different use cases there, whether it's, new ways to gather and create communities as fans, new ways to engage with your customers and engage with your kind of top fans, if you're an artist or an athlete or a filmmaker, actor, or something like that. Those use cases really kind of stood out to me. Also, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about this, but gaming is a really interesting sector, I think, because one, it's very easy to see how crypto and Web3 can kind of fit into like the gaming space in general. I think blockchain, a lot of things haven't been really figured out when it comes to blockchain, but one thing that it's very, very good at, and that's kind of established now, it's almost unmatched at the ability to create economies within ecosystems, right? And when you think about the in-game economies that a lot of these games have or are going to have in the future, it's an immediate fit into like this blockchain technology. So gaming, really stood out to me. You kind of compound that too and look at it from a macro perspective that, we look at on a daily basis. Gaming is also one of the most recession-proof kind of sectors, right? You could even argue that gaming thrives when we're in a recession, right? So those two things kind of combined really stood out to me for gaming specifically. And then the creator economy just more broadly, right? There were a lot of people who came up and talked about kind of building your own brand. I think one that, to answer your question of one that stood out to me that I wouldn't have really thought to attend was I think a couple guys in like the Rumble Kongs NFT team came up and they were talking about building their own personal brand using NFTs and like kind of like where they started and kind of how they were able to entrench themselves within this community and contribute to it. And by doing that, kind of added to their Web3 and like digital identity and brand,
Awesome.
which was really cool to hear, and they had a really good panel, and that one I think stood out to me as one that I wouldn't have necessarily gone to in general, but I was just there at the location that it was at, and so I just ended up checking it out, and it was really cool.
Was there any games or any game studios that you attended that really stood out? Because that sounds like an area that we have covered before, like talking about Axie Infinity, other like play to earn games. Was there anything that like kind of stood out on that front, or any names that you recognize?
So what's interesting is I got into some of the people that I met were also very interesting, right? And so I was there by myself, so I kind of like during lunchtime and stuff would just kind of see other people who were by themselves and just roll up to them and be like, hey, what's going on? Like just like sit down and chat with them. And actually 2 or 3 of them ended up just like they're 3D artists. There were a lot of 3D artists there, looking to learn more about the space. Also, there were people, who were very entrenched in the space that were part of this game design and stuff like that, which was really cool. One of them told me about this company called Mythical Games that apparently is doing a lot of really interesting stuff. I haven't looked into them like too much, but that was one that kind of stood out. That wasn't necessarily like a panel or an event that I went to, but something that definitely stood out to me where there's just a lot of 3D artists kind of like experimenting in this space and like looking for kind of what's next. Definitely super interesting though. Yeah, there's their website. I believe they have a lot of stuff coming out, so definitely gonna keep an eye on them.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I feel like a theme I'm getting from what you're talking about and like all the different categories is that like NFTs expand a lot more can span a lot more use cases than people think. And it's so closely tied to blockchains because they're on blockchains. So like when we talk about like Solana volume, a ton of it's for Magic Eden NFTs. Like when we talk about Ethereum volume, a ton of it's from NFTs on Ethereum. So like it's kind of interesting how they're basically going to be interconnected, and the technology of the blockchain and NFT are going to be used in a lot of these different use cases. And I feel like it's so flexible that it's just up to the company or whatever it is, the project, to figure out the best way to use it for them. And like, I actually, you might know this guy, Evan, but from the creator and film side, Jacob Riglin, he used to be a big creator with Sam Colder, but he like, he has a big business and stuff, but he just started doing like NFTs, and like, it's just totally boosted like the way that people engage with him, how they can interact with his content. And like, I can just imagine that being, the creator economy to gaming to DAOs. Like, I just feel like it seems like that's kind of the common theme, that there's, a lot of different ways to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's something where you're starting to see these names that, became big in Web 2, where they were influencers on an Instagram or Twitter, and they realized that they're able to gain so much power and connection with their community through NFTs because of the ownership that they get through their content, that it's like Zoe's saying, it drives even further brand engagement that then was already there. but also it creates a whole new ecosystem where these like Instagram, Twitter aren't walled gardens. It seems like with the tough thing with creators in kind of the Web2 space that we're at, and we've talked about this before, is that, you know, their value really lives on platform. If they're an Instagram influencer, then maybe, you know, Facebook or Twitter or even other platforms, they wouldn't have that type of influence that they do on Instagram. This is an area where they can start to take that value and push it into other areas through blockchain, through NFTs, and you can start to make deeper connections with people that maybe you didn't get to touch before because you were just restricted to that one platform.
And to your point, Zoe, about like the networking, like, you know, hearing at least like some of the feedback from people on Twitter, like apparently that was kind of some of the people, like the attendees, like that was one of their favorite pieces, was meeting new people, like, you know, getting an idea, getting a feel for what people are working on, where people at, and just making a lot of those connections. Because I feel like I really do get like early internet vibes, you know, like when the internet first, like when everyone thought it was going to go to shit, like in the like late 90s, and then it turned around and became the most important thing, you know, ever basically. And, you know, I feel like we're kind of in that kind of, you know, period. But
yeah, no doubt. I think the like meeting people was really like just one example of just an interesting connection, right? It's like I was sitting down, I was talking to this guy, and then another guy came up. I believe his name was Martin. He's from Argentina, and we just started chatting. And he runs a company that does 3D rendering. And so this is just another, you know, 3D artist. And you know, he was kind of showing us what he's working on and stuff. And the guy that I was talking to does, you know, 3D modeling, 3D rendering for games and stuff. And so they were kind of discussing. The guys, the Martin's main client is you know, furniture companies and things like that, who are looking to do 3D rendering of like their furniture and stuff, you know, in, you know, spatial settings and like things like that. And so, I mean, immediately, you know, our buddy, you know, Vaisman, he works in furniture. So I just texted him. I was like, hey, like, is this something that you'd be like interested in seeing? And he was like, yeah. So now I'm gonna, like, you know, connect them and like kind of see where that goes. Like, you know, you never know. But like, it's just crazy things like that, right? Like random connections where like, you know, you just meet somebody and you know, you start connecting the dots and like seeing where new possibilities are, new you know, ways of working together. You know, he's having a lot of you know, interest from game designers and things like that for product placement and basically new ways to advertise if you're a brand, right, in the metaverse, right? And so creating their products and like having those 3D renders available in the metaverse is obviously going to be a very important thing moving forward. And so it was very interesting to chat with him on kind of like where his business is going and the possibilities and kind of the web3 space. But just one example of like, you know, you never know who you're going to meet and like how it's going to connect to something like random. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That's really cool.
really cool.
So
yeah, go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is I think this week, one thing to really, you know, one thing to really kind of note is that I personally, and I think a lot of people were expecting a very kind of groupthink, rah, like this is everything, this is going to be it, like we're not wrong, and like you can't tell us anything that's wrong about this whole space and like all of this stuff, right? And there was a fair amount of that. I will say, like there was a lot of, you know, some speakers just coming up and like promising the future and like, you know, saying this is gonna like revolutionize everything and like everything will be this and everything will be that, like very, very broad, general bullish statements were being made, right? And I kind of expected that. But it was also interesting talking to people and getting kind of more nuanced views. Folks that have been in the space for quite some time have seen a lot. And I think coming out of it, I think a broad assumption that's made for a lot of people who are kind of bullish on the space is that decentralization is always the best thing. And coming out of this week, I feel like my view has changed a little bit in that I think decentralization potentially has its place, but there is something to be said for having centralized entities, right? And there's pros and cons to kind of both things. And if we're going to get to this, Web3 world where things are, mostly hinged on decentralization, there has to be kind of an incremental step of like, let's call it Web 2.5, where there will still have to be, central entities that are controlling what needs to be done, but still simultaneously using either public or private blockchains, right? And coming out of this week, I almost see that as a more tangible and more achievable future, particularly in like the short to medium term. Right. So like, let me give you like an example, right? Like, what are like in terms of when you think of pros of decentralization? There's like security, there's like the transparency aspect, there's like the fact that you can't really censor it. These are all like really good pros, right? And when you think of the cons though, there are some massive, massive cons. Mainly, we talk about the fact that there's absolutely no recourse if anything like shitty happens, right? Everything is on you and you solely. If you can get like a phishing attack on a Discord or something and you get scammed, like you're totally out of luck, right? Say you make some mistake and like, you do something that you didn't like, fat finger something or something like that. Absolutely no recourse, right? To that end, there's also no real accountability besides for just you, right? The centralized entity or a decentralized entity can't really take any accountability for anything that happens because it's decentralized, right? It's owned by, the population. And lastly, as we always kind of talk about, the performance, right? The performance of fully decentralized kind of organizations and, entities might be worse than a centralized entity who can provide better performance and inherently then a better customer experience. And I think looking at it from a customer experience lens and like, how can we use blockchain and these tools to basically improve the customer experience? I think that is going to be answering that question is going to be how we onboard the next million, the next 10 million, the next 100 million users into this space, right? And so I think my perspective kind of changed through talking to a few people this week. I'd love to get your guys' opinion on it too. But, just people in the space who have been here for a long time and seen a lot of stuff, maybe not being like as gung-ho as I would have thought about the prospect of like a fully decentralized kind of world.
Right.
Yeah, I like that idea of Web 2.5. It's like almost like if you had a company that would like help it like manage people's MetaMask or like help provide a level of insurance to their MetaMask accounts, like or something like that. Like it's almost like, because you bring up such a good point about onboarding, because there's only 10 million monthly active users right now on MetaMask, and there's over 100 million people that have crypto. So you're only talking about 10% of the world has experienced like the decentralized Web3 world, and the rest are just kind of getting their hands dirty in crypto, but they don't have a MetaMask, which means they're not on Web3. So it's like there's such a huge market, and I feel like you're so right. I feel like part of what's holding them back is like, listen, I'm not FDIC insured with this. Like, I don't even know. Like, this kind of seems, there's just a lot to learn. Like, it was weird creating my MetaMask and like having money in there and having it as like an extension and just like you're sending and receiving. And it's like, it's a weird experience the first time, but I think it's a good point. Like, there needs to be some sort of middle ground, a bridge, like to over decentralized Web3. So I like that point, Zoe.
Yeah, it's weird. It's hard, and it's mostly scary, right? When I was buying my first NFT, I hit up Alex Garcia and I was like, we're hopping on a Zoom because I don't want to screw this up, right? Not everybody has the king of NFTs go and hit up, right? So I totally feel that. And I think we talk about this, like, I think we talked about it with like Audius, right? It's like when you go into Audius, it doesn't feel like a Web3 company, right? It feels very, very natural. The UI, the UX is very natural. And so I think definitely, right, it's kind of like that crawl, walk, run approach. And even if we do get to a point where it's like we can have more of these decentralized entities, to get there and to get the onboarding factor, like you mentioned, we're going to have some middle ground, and it's going to have to be that crawl, walk, run approach to getting there. I'd love to dive a little bit deeper myself into kind of your points around keeping some of the centralized pieces and what exactly would make sense to be decentralized. Because I feel kind of the same way about, I guess, applicable to this, like NFTs as a whole. It's like, I feel like everything we talk about, it's like, oh, an NFT could be used for this. It's like, yes, it could, but would it be better in its current form, as it is, right? Rather than being an NFT or something like that, right? So I think those will start to become more and more clear, how to like distinguish between what makes sense to be decentralized, what makes sense to be a little bit more centralized, as we kind of go along. But obviously that decentralization piece is kind of what really excited me about the space, but I totally hear you that that's probably not the case for each and every situation and everything across the board. So yeah, definitely want to keep diving into that as we kind of move through these chats.
Yeah, and I think the other part, I think towards the beginning of what you were saying, Zoe, was that there are a lot of people still bullish and promising you the world with the type of collections or whatever project they're working on. And there's like an understanding that needs to happen with the last 2 years that we saw this crazy bull market and all these projects were given a ton of attention. Different cryptos were bought heavily, and we're back in this building phase where we have to come to terms with where the state of crypto is at the moment and the type of utilities, like you're saying, Mata, that this stuff actually has like right now. When you look at the most important projects, I think, in the space, they're helping out developers with building their own platforms. They're creating like different funds essentially that you can hop into for being able to buy Bitcoin or have a couple different Bitcoins in your or coins in your wallet. My biggest thing is that we aren't at the stage where we're seeing a crazy utility for the end customer. At the moment, we're seeing a ton of utility for the developer that's in the space. And so in the next couple of years here, we need to start unpacking those ideas around how we can create end or utility for the end user. But you're right, at the moment, we've got a few people in the space that are talking too bullish. They're not being honest about, where we are in the type of utility we can deliver. And so it's that, bear market mentality where this is the time to build, this isn't the time to promise. And so it's exciting to hear that there's people in the space that have that mentality, that are willing to admit that, hey, we're not in the same mentality that we were 1 year ago, where everything was amazing and every project's going to the moon. This is really a time to drive utility, and it sounded like that was being talked a lot about.
Yeah,
Really good
yeah,
point.
absolutely. There's I wouldn't argue with a single thing that all of you guys said. I think it was just a weird kind of like mind shift, because I think the overall assumption was that decentralization is the way to go, but understanding that, but then there's also those people who are like, why can't we do everything on Web 2? Why do we even need Web 3, right?
Right.
And if we're being honest, like, I know I talk to you guys about this a lot, but I always think that, the truth is somewhere in the middle, regardless of really whatever it is, right? And so both of these two extreme views, the truth is what's going to end up being the future is probably somewhere in the middle of those two outcomes, right? Like, do I really think that like Web3 is just going to go nowhere and like nothing is going to happen with the entire space? Of course not. But at the same time, like, is it going to overtake everything and everything that we do? That's also like quite a stretch. And there's also use cases where like, yeah, sure, you probably don't even need Web3 in this instance, right? Kind of going back to that, what is Web3 like really good for? What are blockchains like really good for? And I think it's building economies within a specific ecosystem, whether it's a game or it's a marketplace for XYZ. And like, those sort of things is where blockchains are really solid. I think private blockchains will start becoming more and more popular, I think, because let's say you have a way to, as a company, launch your own blockchain, right? Maybe you don't want anyone taking the NFT that they have in your game and going out in the broader market and selling it somewhere else. Maybe you just want a marketplace in your own game and all the exchanges to happen in your own game. Also, with that centralization, that enables you, if there's some bullshit that happens, to be able to go and have some sort of recourse, right? Like the underlying technology of the blockchain and enabling that exchange of value and ownership over a particular digital asset is still there, but it is centralized in that it's private, right? It's just managed by maybe that company or something like that. So these are all kind of things that I hadn't necessarily considered before some of the conversations that I had this week. And it's pretty difficult to understand how, without any sort of like these key things of like accountability, recourse, like how do you get so many more people to use this, right? Like that's such a big part of a lot of the customer experience and things that we talk about today in successful businesses. These are all kind of thoughts that I had and kind of changes in my thought process before like going into the week versus like coming out of this week. So it's interesting. I don't know if you guys have anything else to say on the conference. Happy to cover it, but yeah, you guys have anything else?
I guess just like a general question, like obviously the main topics were NFTs and the communities and space and everything like that, but was there any mention or talks of like, L1s or anything like that? Like, was it like still kind of like Ethereum's king, or like, was there talks of like building on Solana? Like, was there any sort of like, what was the temperature check on that? Or was it really just mainly like, this is the space, it doesn't really matter what it's being built on and everything like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I honestly, surprisingly, didn't have that many discussions around like L1s, L2s, that sort of thing. Even like tokens in general, I don't really feel like I had that much conversation on. I think, with one of this VC guy that I was talking to, the concept of having tokens and NFTs as essentially from a business standpoint, new ways to define like CAC, like customer acquisition cost, and like kind of like this new paradigm of like using these kind of tokens and NFTs to incentivize new customers and like using it as like a growth vehicle to acquire new customers. That was one of the conversations I had, and I thought that was, pretty interesting. And there's going to be a lot of strategy work done around like what's the most efficient way to actually do that, because at the same time you don't want to incentivize with the token for it to just be dumped, because that just wrecks your token price, right? So there's going to be a lot of strategy around like what's the most efficient way to do that versus managing your emissions for that token, managing how you release NFTs and like that sort of stuff. So that was an interesting conversation. But yeah, like to your point, like I didn't really have that many discussions around any of like the L1s, L2s, things that kind of we like to discuss over here.
One thing you brought up about the decentralization kind of like dilemma, it reminded me of Michael. This is Michael Saylor's point that he makes about Bitcoin and why he thinks literally every other crypto is garbage. Is because he literally says Bitcoin is the only one that's proven to be a decentralized currency and the only one that's actually worked. So in his mind, like that's the reason why he only invests in Bitcoin, and why, people like Pomp are always talking about Bitcoin, but like the Bitcoin Moxie argument is it's the only proven decentralized currency ever. And the idea that we're just going to create another one, willy-nilly is tough. But obviously I think something will come along, but I think that it just reminded me of like the Bitcoin argument of like why a lot of those guys don't believe in any of these other cryptocurrencies long-term, because that's been the only one to prove out a decentralized currency. But I not that I disagree or agree with that. I just reminded me of the point that they make about it.
And I think that comes back to a point in like product marketing or management called like Crossing the Chasm, where essentially for you to go from being a project that, you know, has a lot of momentum and is up and coming to actually being sustainable, sticky in the space that you're going to be in, you have to cross this chasm where you have to go from these early adopters into the mainstream audience. And I think that's what we're going to see in the next couple of years. We're going to see these coins, you know, either be able to cross that chasm or, you know, die trying. And so it's a great point. It's a big question of whether Ethereum has been able to make that switch. That's really the one that's kind of in that chasm at the moment of going from that top altcoin to mainstream coin. And then we've got Solana, you know, we've got Avalanche, we got the rest on down. But it's a great point of where do you see the chasm? Where do you see the mainstream adoption? And who hasn't gotten there yet? So great tangent. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry on that.
No, that's fire.
No, I love that. I love that. And it kind of goes hand in hand with what I see as like some key things that need to happen in the short to medium term to help this process. And I think, you know, right now, going back to everything you guys talked about, the process of actually using all of this stuff is clunky and just has a lot of friction inherently, right? Setting up the wallet, doing this, doing that. There needs to be a way, and it needs to be like from top to bottom where you're not thinking in Ethereum or you're not thinking in Bitcoin, you're not thinking in these other terms, you're thinking in dollars, right? So like the price on the screen that you see is like, okay, this costs X dollars, right? There needs to be a payment mechanism where I can pay with my credit card right on the spot. Like I think one of the biggest takeaways this week is like just thinking about like, in order for this to be successful, it has to improve the customer experience. Otherwise it won't work. And so like, what are the things that need to change to make this a better customer experience? Because we all know the underlying like blockchain technology, especially when it comes to economies, marketplaces, this sort of stuff is very good. But it's a question of like, how do we get people to actually use this, right? And for me, it's, you know, making that onboarding experience just straight up US dollars, credit card. Like I will do this, and everything going on in terms of payment processing and like the transaction, everything is happening behind the scenes. I think that's like a massive thing. And then the second thing is what we've been talking about this whole time is utility, right? It's like, okay, once I have this NFT, once I have this, like, what do I do with it, right? The gaming like example is very clean. It's very obvious. It's like, okay, this game is sick. I'm going to keep playing this game. And now I actually own this thing that I spent money on, right? So that's a very clean example. But in other things, right? Like that's why going back all the way to the beginning of what I was saying, entertainment and the creator economy makes so much sense to me, because in entertainment, you're able to say, okay, I have this now. Now I have access to XYZ things. I'm a huge fan of these artists or these players or these movie creators, whatever. And I have XYZ access because I own this asset, right?
The demand is there, right? The demand is there, but you're right. The supply, like we haven't figured that out. And it's that product market fit question of Bitcoin was able to establish theirs because they established themselves as a store of value. You know, that's what gold did. If you look back hundreds of years, you know, it's a pure element. You're able to have pure gold, and that's why it creates value. When you look at some of these other blockchains, it's a question of how do they fit into those spaces? What is unique about them that makes the entertainment industry work well compared to Bitcoin, compared to Ethereum, where you've got high gas fees, slow transaction fees, and, you know, a crazy decentralization, but, you know, maybe not what's needed with that. And so you're totally right. I think this was, you know, everything I'm hearing is from this conference, we understood that like the supply side or the demand side is there. Now, creating the different products that are going to be able to fit into those are going to be the biggest question marks that come out of these like next few years, and probably next couple NFT NYCs coming up.
Yeah, Absolutely. Like you said, we're kind of early, right? We have the innovators, we have the early adopters, we have the people who want the newest things. A very key piece for crossing that chasm, like you mentioned, right, is getting that early majority, having that full solution that's actually baked out, and having that product market fit for all these, other tokens, organizations, coins, whatever you want to deem them outside of Bitcoin. Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like the sweet spot will be where it's helping the business gather, develop a better relationship with their customers and also probably gather more information. But then it's also giving the customers a better experience with that company. So like I think Linkstyle is a great example. Like, people that are, courses and shops that are affiliated with them are getting more business. The people that own the Linkstyle NFT are part of a community and also are getting discounts if they enjoy golf. That adds up pretty quickly. Like things like that I could see being replicated across, different kind of, like you said, entertainment or sports or.
Yeah,
but,
what's that 5-iron deal that they have? Don't you get like 50% off rounds there? The 5-iron
that's a silly
golf?
question.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh yeah, Kenta has that. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what discount you get, but you get a solid discount. I mean,
Yeah.
he got a club fitting there. He got like a bunch of stuff that was like way
That's
way
real
cheaper than
utility.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's like
the club fitting is not that's a big deal.
Yeah, right.
I mean, he didn't get it for free, but like he got
Yeah,
it like heavily discounted, like where those usually cost like hundreds of dollars, I think. He got it like heavily discounted, so he ended up just like getting a new set from there, getting the club fitting. They obviously have all the machinery and stuff needed to like measure everything about your swing. No, it's like it's a really interesting partnership that they have there with that NFT collection.
And I think that it gets back to that point of there's going to be people that promise this amazing utility, but to create that partnership between an NFT collection and 5-iron golf, which is absolutely like an established company and a great brand, that takes a lot of commitment and a lot of follow through on like the NFT collections team's side. So it's all that idea of, looking at the actions rather than the talk that we're seeing.
Mhm.
And like you're saying, Sia, like Linkstyle is a great example of that.
Awesome, boys. Well, I think that'll do it for this week. A quick recap and awesome discussion around the events this week in NFT NYC. We hope that all you guys who are listening like found it really useful. Hopefully we can get all of us there next year. That would be a lot of fun. But there's a lot of conferences coming up. I think like in a lot of different cities, there's going to be like Ethereum conferences and different crypto Web3 type conferences. So hopefully between the four of us, we can attend a few more of those before the year comes to a close. That'd be fun to kind of just like have one of us go and like report back on what the latest and greatest is.
Oh,
But
yeah.
to our fans, like thank you so much for tuning in yet again. And we'll be back same time, same place next week. If you found any of this useful or helpful or funny or whatever, make sure to like and subscribe down below. And we'll see you guys next week. Wag me.
Wag me.
Later.